Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Payan. I am the director of the Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Recently, some 12 million documents and records, now known as the Pandora Papers, were leaked out. These papers deepened our understanding of how the wealthy around the world move their wealth, often to protect it from scrutiny by governments, financial systems, and society at large. This is also evidenced how some governments create offshore havens for this capital, helping to abscond it from all accountability to the very places where this wealth, some legal, some illegal, some legitimate, and some not, is made. These documents, 12 million, as I mentioned, were obtained and examined by the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists. This is a collaboration. This analysis of these documents was a collaboration of some 140 media organizations and hundreds of journalists who combed through the records and found the names of multiple financiers, business leaders, political leaders, royalty members, members of the entertainment industry, and many other individuals in these papers. Of course, it is not illegal to use tax havens and to move money around the world, but that is if the money is both legal and legitimate and has been through the proper tax and financial system. The problem is that it is often used, these moves of capital around the world into tax havens, to avoid paying taxes, to avoid paying suppliers and workers, and even to launder money. So at the end of the day, understanding how much of this money, by the way, an estimated $32 trillion is hidden away, is important for us. More specifically to our event today, we know that the names of several Mexican politicians and other figures were found in the Pandora Papers. Some of them are close to the administration of President López Obrador. Now, this is important because Mr. López Obrador, the president of Mexico, made fighting corruption and separating the economic from the political power and punishing all kinds of wrongdoing a major flag of his political movement. Yet Mexico, as far as we can tell, has undertaken little to no action regarding Pandora Papers. And the country itself has been labeled as more corrupt today than when Mr. López Obrador took office. So the Pandora Papers would appear to represent a very good opportunity for Mr. López Obrador to show his true commitment to anti-corruption, seriously looking at the Pandora Papers and going after those who appear in those papers and find out if indeed their moves of capital to these safe havens is legitimate and legal or not. But will he? And that's the question. So to explore these Pandora Papers and what they mean for Mexico's fight against corruption and this opportunity for the López Obrador administration to really take this on, we have an extraordinary couple of guests today. One is Peniley Ramírez, who herself participated in examining, combing through the Pandora Papers over months. She knows firsthand what's in them and who are the Mexicans that are named in these papers, and what is the status of these investigations. And she would also be able to enlighten us regarding the intentions of the current López Obrador administration to pursue these in papers and these investigations, and of course punish corruption, if any appears to be in these papers. And after that, we'll have the insights by Rodrigo Montes de Oca, one of our scholars here at the Mexico Center, and someone who follows issues of the rule of law in Mexico very, very closely for us here. So let me introduce our first guest, Peniley, and then I will introduce Rodrigo, and then I'll pass the microphone on to Penny so that we get into the conversation without delay. Peniley Ramírez has a degree in communication sciences from the Universidad Veracruzana in Mexico. She's a candidate for a master's degree in business and economics journalism at Columbia University in New York. And for 7 years, she was a correspondent in Mexico's for Univision's investigative unit. She has been an opinion columnist for Reforma, El Universal, and we know that today she's a very active and influential journalist in the media and social media in Mexico, and somebody that is appealed to very often to do analysis on Mexico. She was nominated for 6 journalism Emmys, and she has participated in global journalistic investigations, including the Panama Papers and, of course, now the Pandora Papers. She has one book, an important book that I highly recommend, The Millionaires of the War, about corrupt businesses behind the Mexican war on drugs, and has co-authored 19 buildings, such as 19 Wounds, both by Penguin Random House. And then let me introduce Rodrigo now, before we move on to our conversation. Rodrigo Montes de Oca is a research scholar here at the Mexico Center. His research primarily focuses on the rule of law and corruption in Mexico. Rodrigo Montes de Oca previously worked at the Supreme Court in Mexico for 10 years as a clerk for Supreme Court Justice Jose Ramon Cosío Diaz. He's, of course, written extensively on rule of law issues in Mexico and positions on issues civil, criminal, and administrative, including class action lawsuits, consumer protection mechanisms, liability of public officials, organized crime, recreational use of drugs, and health regulations. From 2009 to 11, he was part of the editorial board of Reforma, and he's back as a member of that team. And he is currently a member of the editorial committee for the Law Practice, a collection published by Tirán Leblanc. We're very proud to have Rodrigo among our members. And so let me, without further ado, get the microphone to Peniley so she can give us her insights. Peniley, your turn. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. And I will start giving you an insight on how we managed to review all these documents through the months before the publication. I joined the project, now named as Pandora Papers, in the in the winter of 2020. So we were starting working, the ICIJ was working months before that, but some of the news media that we participated in Mexico, which was the magazine Proceso, the Spanish daily El País, and the Quinto Elemento Lab, which is a nonprofit focused on investigative journalism in Mexico, and Univision, where I worked then. So we approached at the beginning to this Djerejian massive leak. We had some tools provided by ICIJ to review all the documents at the beginning using tags and keywords. So we were starting using keywords as Mexico, for example, Mexican passports, some keywords in order to try to narrow down which parts of this giant leak was related to Mexico or to Mexican individuals, companies, and people. So after a month doing this, we narrowed the leak to 3,000 people related to Mexico or Mexican citizens. After that, we had these weekly meetings with all the reports. We were at the most part of the work was done by 6 reporters. I was the only reporter from Univision at the beginning, but then with my team, Gerardo Reyes and Margarita Rabin from my team, they are both based in Miami, and I was the only one based in Mexico. Then another journalist in Mexico joined us, Claudia Ocaranza. So we tried to focus on which of these 3,000 people from Mexico were most important to the public knowledge. So we narrowed down from 3,000 people to 60 people. That was at the beginning of the spring of 2020. And then we spent like a month and a half trying to review all the documents related to these 60 people in the data. We divided, I took 10 of them. One of them is one I want to tell you today about this story, was the son of the former leader of the Pemex union, Carlos Romero de Champs, his son, and some other people related to politics, they were business owners, they were tycoons from Mexico. So we tried to figure out what was in the documents about this 60 final list. After that, I was reviewing, let's say, it was like maybe 5,000 documents just myself for these people. And then we elaborated some memos of each individual in order to share with the rest of the Mexican team, but also with the rest of the ICIJ team, global team. We shared our findings in order to figure out which stories we were finding. After this, we were doing all the regular reporting process, which was we were filling FOIAs in Mexico, we were filling FOIAs here, we were reporting on the ground, we were interviewing people in order to figure out what was the story behind the documents or within the documents. So after this, we had this meeting, I think it was in the middle of July, in order to focus was the main stories regarding Mexico. So this was a story you have been published in this week. So we found 1,241 companies, 72 foundations. What else? More, as I said, more than 3,000 clients. And we found that the Mexican people in the Pandora Papers were focused in 9 law firms, mostly for law firms in different jurisdictions. And they were using these offshore companies for 2 main objectives, like that. One was to avoid taxes, as we know for other stories within the project. And the other one was to avoid the obligation to report their wealth as, for example, as part of the government or government officials, it's more related to what you do in the Berkeley Institute. So we try to figure out how to deal with this, considering that it's not a sin to be rich. It's not a thing to be wealthy. So the problem is when you use these offshore companies to hide your wealth, to avoid paying taxes, or to hide that you are wealthier than you should be if you are a public official or you were a public official. So it is important to say this because I think most of the misunderstanding with this project, it is that some people believe it is a project just about taxes avoidance, which is not. For example, in the story I work on about this son of the former Pemex union leader, Carlos Romero Duran, which is the son, Carlos Romero de Champs is the father. He used these bearer share companies, which doesn't exist anymore, to hide that he and his family owned, I think it was like 10 properties, millionaire properties in Mexico, in different states of Mexico. So after years of being in the middle of the scandal, Mr. Romero de Champs and his family was under investigation by the Financial Investigative Unit in Mexico, and they didn't find these properties. So we had access to the formal investigations, which is an investigation related specifically to financial crimes. And we figured out that they didn't find these properties that were hid with this structure that was used by, I think it was a company in Bahamas and another company in Panama. So for me, this is a good example of how you can use these structures, not just to avoid taxes, but also to avoid public accountability from the press or from the government. So right now, as Tony said at the beginning, in different jurisdictions, we have been having these reactions from politicians. In Mexico, we had this announcement from the Financial Investigative Unit saying that they were starting investigations regarding on this. But the problem is with this financial investigative unit is in the last 3 or 4 years, we have been a lot of investigations coming from this office, but none of them has taken into a real case that has been properly investigated in the hands of federal prosecutors. So what's going to happen after this? We don't know for sure right now. We know that we only have this announcement of a further investigation. We know, and this is important too, of our findings, it's that some cases that we found in the Pandora Papers were about the same individuals that we've already found before in the Panama Papers in 2016. One of them, for example, is this businessman, Juan Armando Hinojosa, that was behind this famous case in Mexico known as the White House case or the Casa Blanca case. That was a businessman from Mexico, which helped the former president, Enrique Peña Nieto, to buy a house, a giant mansion of $7 million in Mexico City. So this person was in the papers when we worked on Panama Papers, and he is now again in the Pandora Papers. So another major finding for me that we had was that a lot of people that were working with this Mossack Fonseca Panama law firm that was the center of the Panama Papers scandal, they, after the Panama Papers release, moved to another law firms. So now we found that again with another law firm, but doing the same. So I think this is a good reason to try to narrow the debate about, it is about a law firm. What happens with a law firm has to take responsibility about their verification process or the way they manage their accounts or their clients. Well, we can see now that they moved to another law firm. So I think this is a good point to enter the debate about how this can be improved. So I will leave right now my first intervention, and I'm happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you. Let me, before Rodrigo begins to speak, let me remind our guests, the audience, that they can, using the Q&A feature at the bottom center of your screen, you can begin to write up your questions. And then when I come back, I will moderate those questions and place them before our guests. Rodrigo, please, the microphone is yours.
Thanks, Tony. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to share this panel with Peniley and with Tony. In my opinion, Peniley is one of the best investigative journalists in Mexico. Every Saturday, it is always exciting to read her weekly op-ed at Reforma newspaper. The method she applies and approach most of her investigation is based on follow the money, which helps to light corruption, tax evasion, and money laundering scandals. But I'm talking about this because this catchphrase, follow the money, motivated this group of 600 journalists from around the world to publish this fantastic global investigation, the Pandora Papers. In a previous meeting with Tony asked us a relevant question. Will Mexico take advantage of this global investigation, or will this be another missed opportunity in the country's fights against corruption? Trying to answer these questions and to have some context, I did some research with the help of Clara Richardson, a colleague in the Baker Institute, about the social and policy outcomes unfolded from the Panama Papers investigation, which was published in April 2016, and is one of the previous episodes in this ICIJ saga. Before analyzing some of the major global outcomes of the 2016 Panama Papers and comparing them with what was happened and what should happen in Mexico after the revelations, I want to share with you some important ideas that we need to keep in mind. There are some difference between the 2021 Pandora Papers and the 2016 Panama Papers. In Pandora Papers, the leak came from 14 offshore providers and included more information about the beneficial owners of the offshore companies than any previous leak. In contrast, as Peniley mentioned, in Panama Papers, the leak came from one single provider, the now defunct law firm Mossack Fonseca in Panama. Another thing that I learned from the Panama Papers is that we have to be patient because government's investigations, indictments, prosecution, and legislative amendments take time. Some outcomes came immediately after the revelations, such as the resignations of public officials mentioned in the leak. Still, most of the most significant outcomes take time to take shape, such as substantive policy changes. To systematize the outcomes of the Panama Papers, I want to point out three situations. The first one, the resignations of public officials involved in offshore companies that failed to reveal this information when they became public servants. These situations most of the time happen in the short term after the revelations. About this topic, we found a very similar situation between Iceland's former prime ministers and Mexican Senator Armando Guadiana from Morena's party. Senator Guadiana is a mining tycoon and a member of the Energy Commission at the Senate. That by itself sounds like a conflict of interest, but this is not the topic of this panel. After the Panama Papers revelation, one of the first names of politicians that came to light was Iceland Prime Minister at that time. The Prime Minister was confronted by journalists in a TV program about his interest in an offshore company, and he struggled to answer the questions. The story behind this was that he failed to reveal his interest in this offshore company when he became a congressman a few years ago. Long story short, now this person is Iceland's former prime minister because he was pushed to step down after the scandal. After the Pandora Papers revelations, now in 2021, the name of Mexican Senator Armando Guadiana came to light as the beneficial owner of an offshore company. When he created the company, he declared a net worth of $28 million. The senator held a press conference where he struggled to answer the reporters' questions, and he publicly admitted that he failed to declare this information when he became a senator. Currently, Armando Guadiana remains in his seat in Congress. Similar facts, completely different outcomes. The second situation is the prosecution of corruption cases that came to light due to the Panama Papers investigation. This situation usually happened in the midterm after the revelation. Although Odebrecht's corruption investigation began earlier, there were still one of the largest firms mentioned in the 2016 Panama Papers. Odebrecht, this Brazilian company accused of paying bribes, admitted to corruption 8 months after the Panama Papers leaked. The outcomes in most of Latin American countries were huge. Some presidents stepped down and were prosecuted. For instance, the former president of Peru, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, is still under house arrest. In contrast, in Mexico, a few weeks ago, the former CEO of Pemex, who was one of the main implicated in the Odebrecht corruption scheme, was captured by a reporter having dinner at a high-end restaurant in Mexico City. Similar facts, completely different outcomes. Finally, the third category is policy and regulation impacts, who usually happen in the long term. A few days ago, after years of these revelations, more than 130 countries had signed on to a deal that will tax multinational companies at a minimum rate of 15% to tackle tax avoidance by some of the world's biggest multinational companies. So back to Tony's question, it would be very optimistic to think that this time Mexico government will do something different to take advantage of this investigation. I want to share with you one final idea. Last April, ICIJ reported that 5 years after the Panama Papers were first published, Governments worldwide have now reimbursed to their treasuries more than 1.36 billion in back taxes and penalties as a direct result of the Panama Papers. Collaborative investigation journalists and international journalist consortiums like ICIJ heavily rely on charitable giving from philanthropists and foundations. So projects like Pandora show that each dollar invested can generate hundreds of dollars in benefits to society. I will stop here and I will pass the microphone to Tony to start the conversation and the Q&A session.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Well, you guys have put a number of important questions. So let me follow up and rephrase the question. If you both believe that the President López Obrador will not follow through on this important opportunity, he's been given the data, he's been given the facts, he's been given the opportunity to show that he's serious about fighting corruption. And it seems to me that I hear from what Peniley and you, Rodrigo, are saying that he's not likely to follow through. Then the next question is, why not? Peniley, why not? Why can't he? Why won't he follow through?
Well, I think it is important to notice that for López Obrador, it is really important to feed a daily press conference agenda. So if you have to feel, let's think if this was a live television show. It is not, but it's the comparison is fair considering right. This. He is live every day for 2 hours, every day. So he's answering questions, he is giving announcements, he's talking about things that interested to him, interested to his government, but also he's answering questions from the press. He have taken the time to speak a lot about different issues, but he has taken really small time to talk about this since the Pandora Papers were published. One reason could be this that you mentioned before about the high officials, current officials related to his government or working for his government that are involved in this. You mentioned, Rodrigo mentioned Armando Guadiana, which is a senator, but we also have, and I think this is a major thing, Julio Scherer, who was the lawyer of the president of Mexico from the beginning of López Obrador government up to few weeks before we published. So during all this investigative process that I described in my first intervention, Julio Scherer was the major power player in the findings, in our findings. He's not anymore the lawyer of the presidency of Mexico, but he was. And he uses this scheme of a company, owner of another company, to hide or maybe to not publicly disclose that he was the owner of a luxury apartment in Miami. What else we have? We have another person named Julia Abdala, which is the partner. She has been the partner for 20 years of Manuel Bartlett, which is the head of the Federal Electrical Commission of Mexico. So you have this, we have more, but this, for example, with these three, we have people really close to López Obrador, really with power in Mexico nowadays. So it's kind of hard to separate, to be in a press conference in the morning in National Palace of Mexico saying, oh, this neoliberal people, this corrupt people in the Pandora Papers, and be referring to people close to the government of Felipe Calderón or close to the government of Peña Nieto, which we already found that. We found those people too, and we are reporting on them too. But you can, I think as a government official, as a president of a country, you can separate and you can just be there talking about these people from the past, let's call it like that, and not to talk about the people from the present, from your own government. So this is looking at this as a political calculation, I think it's understandable that López Obrador is not focusing way that much in the Pandora Papers right now, because it doesn't sound really smart to be doing that if you are going to be captured in your own rhetoric, you know? Let's say that about him. But about his government, what happened? I love this comparison that Rodrigo was making about the Panama Papers and the Pandora Papers. So after the Panama Papers, and I think I will do this little note here. In Mexico, it is not illegal to own an offshore company. You can own it, but you have to report this to the Mexican IRS, to the tax authorities. So you have to let them know that, oh, I have this company is in Seychelles or in Bahamas or in Delaware or in North Dakota. So you can do it, but you have to let them know in order to not avoid the taxes. What happened after the Panama Papers? The Mexican government recovered more than $20 million, which is not that much, as we know, from people and companies that say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that I have this company in Bahamas, but now I can tell you, and so here's my money, and we are fine. So what's happening right now, we don't know, because we don't, as journalists, we don't have access to an important data, which is how many of these 3,000 people that we found actually reported to the tax authorities of Mexico that they had these companies out of the country. So what I can imagine is that right now, the Mexican tax authorities are revising one by one all the companies and all the people that were mentioned in our stories in order to know if they reported or not that they were having these offshore companies. And I presume that the next step will be calling them and say, oh, maybe you forgot to tell, but don't worry, you can do it now. So bring the money back. So I think it's really important to be aware of the fact that we can be seeing this money coming back to Mexico from these companies or these individuals within the next month. I think the political angle is important. For example, is important that López Obrador talks more about this, but it is really important to pay attention about the money. How much money is coming back to Mexico in the coming weeks or in the coming month through this scheme? We don't know now, but it's good to pay attention to that. And also, it's good to pay attention on how this announced investigations by the Financial Investigative Unit are turning into cases, into actual cases, criminal cases, in case of their findings are good. We provided, as you said, like the base data, but I understand that it is not the same to write an article than to prove a case. It is different. So what I expect is that the people within this government institutions do their work. So they use this data already published to narrow it to actual cases that you can bring into a court, or you can use to have these companies and these individuals to report their taxes, to bring the taxes back to Mexico, because this is what we are looking for as journalists when we are trying to narrow this data and put this data into stories. After all the scandals and everything, scandals are important because you have this public debate, but at the end, what is better for society is to have this money back, instead of having people in jail. We need this money back. And as I said, if you recover after a giant publication as the Panama Papers, you only recover $20 million. That doesn't seem that you're doing a good job. We expect more. So what's happening within the Mexican government now with this money? Is this money coming back? I think that's a really important angle that we have to follow in the next month and years.
Yeah, that's a really good opportunity. Rodrigo, unfortunately for this discussion is, and as Penny kind of intuited already in her remarks, this discredits the administration. And this is an administration that ran on fighting corruption, on bringing everybody to be accountable to the people, because he uses that rhetoric quite a bit. What does it mean for the president and his his political movement and his credibility on this issue. I mean, obviously, poor Mexico is going to have to wait for another day to fight corruption. I mean, this is obviously important. And as Penny said, the president speaks every single morning. He's out there for 2 hours talking, and he dampens this out. And he's very good at sending these distractors, raising conversations on different issues, whether it's the national university or something else, to avoid talking about what he really should be talking about, which is his number one item on the agenda, at least as a candidate. What can we expect out of this?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it is very difficult to understand this schizophrenic relation between the press and the president. For the president daily held a press conference, but also in this press conference, he has like an episode that one reporter said all the lies that she think was said in most of the newspapers. So it is very difficult to understand that. And about the reactions in the government, I think in the first reaction that we have seen, I see that they were very different. The head of the WIF, that is the Mexican FinCEN, made a declaration that he will investigate most of the names that were revealed in this investigation. But in contrast, the head of the SAT said that he was not very receptive about the investigation, and said that she has her own investigation, and he will stay in her way. But I think that something that is really, really important, and it is public, and Peniley mentioned, is the bad relation between the head of the Mexican FinCEN and the General Attorney Office. You need full cooperation. If you want results, you really need full cooperation between these agencies, the SAT, the Mexican IRS, and the WIF, the Mexican FinCEN, with the Attorney General Office. Without the Attorney General Office, it is impossible to have cases and to have rulings in these topics.
Yeah, let me bring the issue of cooperation with the United States and begin with you, Rodrigo, going back again to Peniley afterwards. The in-between. I mean, the United States has become a kind of a safe haven for a lot of Mexican money. A lot of properties in San Diego and Miami and San Antonio and here in Houston and on. Is the United States somehow wittingly or unwittingly also becoming an accessory to cover up some of the corruption, whether it's the houses by the Green Party leader Gonzalez in San Antonio, or by the case I just mentioned, this apartment in Miami, or the Murats from Oaxaca that have apartments in New York? I mean, what's the in-between? What can we do to close that gray area, that gap, and prevent the United States from becoming kind of an accessory to this deep corruption that pervades Mexico, and that apparently the López Obrador administration appears unwilling to really tackle?
Yeah, we did this investigation in the Baker Institute, and it is very difficult to understand because both authorities in each side of the border has like all the framework, all the tools to cooperate between. They have the treaties, they had relations between the agencies, but there are any results. There has not been like a big case where the United States returns some properties or returns some bank accounts to Mexico that has some corrupt politicians here in the United States. But they have all the tools, they have all the framework, all the laws, and they don't use it. And also something that it is very important, they prefer to go, instead of the diplomatic ways, they prefer to bring like civil actions to trying to get back these kinds of real estate, of these kinds of money. Peniley also has a very good reporter about the house in San Antonio.
Peniley?
Yeah, we have a joke, a common joke now between investigative journalists in Mexico that if you want to if you want to be a good investigative journalist following financial crimes in Mexico, you have to know how to deal with property taxes, property registers, and companies in the United States. It is because, and specifically, I think you have to be really aware of how works the division of corporations in some states in the United States, particularly Florida, New York, California, and Texas. And it is because these states has been, in the recent years, they haven't, as you said, Tony, for dirty money coming from Mexico in different ways. Dirty money coming from drug smuggling. We have a lot of drug smugglers from Mexico laundering money in Texas, in properties in San Antonio, in properties in California, in Florida, or even here in New York. And also from former officials, Mexican government officials, using these same schemes to launder money. We have the cases of former governor of the Coahuila. We have the case that Tony said about the book I wrote about the former Ministry of Security of Mexico, now accused in the United States as taking bribes from the Sinaloa cartel. He was spending a lot of money in properties, mostly in Florida. But also you have a lot of money coming from gang members, from cartel members, buying these houses, these mansions, these apartments. Sometimes they buy, for example, I made a story about a former governor of the small states of Aguascalientes in the middle of Mexico, and they were buying like entire block in one day. So this could be, it's kind of freak that, authority of maybe a realtor company doesn't realize that this is not normal. It's not normal that even a businessman from Mexico comes and say, oh, I want the entire block. So what's happening in the United States? I think one of the main findings of the Panama Papers is better even with the Panama Papers is that we have been focusing more with the participation of the Washington Post, which was our main associate in the United States for this project, the Pandora Papers project, is how these Delaware companies, these North Dakota companies, South Dakota companies have been used as havens of secrecy within the United States. We always talk about Panama, we always talk our Channel Island or Seychelles or Bahamas or even Switzerland, or Sweden. But what about Delaware? We have been finding a lot of people trying to hide dirty money using this secrecy of Delaware companies. And I really expect that after this publication in the United States, we have a rule change of the secrecy of these state corporation divisions, considering that a lot of dirty money from political corruption, from drug smuggling, as I said, from forced labor, not just from Mexico and Latin America, but also from other countries as Russia, for example, as India, even as countries in the Middle East, are floating into the United States using bank accounts in the United States and buying houses, apartments, stores in the United States. So what happens with this? When United States authority finds this, they start a trial. Usually they start a trial, they keep this, but the system is not changing. So this is happening. This is happening all the time. And it is, as you know, I have been specialized in trying to find these financial crimes from Mexican individuals, but we have been finding the same from people from Latin America, from South America. We found the same with people from Russia, for example. We have been doing the same pattern. So it's not that easy, it's not that hard to understand the pattern. I just wrote this wonderful book about the scandal of this giant public fund in Malaysia, and they were using the same scheme to try to buy properties in California, in New York, using the same scheme, using the same structures of companies, using the same jurisdictions in Bahamas, in Panama. And we have this case, it's kind of funny but sad at the same time, of this pop star Shakira in the Pandora Papers too. And it's kind of funny because if you see the questionnaire that she filled to do this company, there is one part of the questionnaire when they say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And she said, "I'm a housewife." Shakira, she's a giant pop star. And this law firm said, "Okay, so this is your company." So it is not that hard. You only have to Google it. You don't have to be like brilliant investigator. So what I think is we have to enforce this public conversation with the responsibility, not just for the public officials, but also for the bankers, but also for the realtors, but also for the law firms.
Yeah. Let me follow up with another question. I'm going to begin to take up some of the questions that are coming in. There's a statement by one of our Mexico Center scholars, and he says, "Well, we have to remember that Mr. Lozoya is not entirely a free man. He's under house detention, and he's cooperating with the authorities. But the fact that he's seen at a restaurant, at a very fancy, expensive restaurant, enjoying a very good meal, walking almost like a free man, when the street guy who steals food is waiting for a trial in prison, doesn't look good. It kind of reminds me that." You not only have to be a saint, you have to look like a saint. You have to appear to be a saint too. So it doesn't really bode well. And Peniley, I like your opinion on what Rodrigo said. Do you think that given the structural constraints, the disjointedness of Mexican justice institutions and the personal rivalries, for example, between Santiago Nieto at the Financial Intelligence Unit and the prosecutor, the general prosecutor, Mr. Gertz Manero, do you think that they're going to be able to get a hold of this, or this is just time is just going to run, the clock is going to run out, and then nothing will happen again? There'll be another sexenio, and these cases will just be in the books for history. What are the chances that real justice can be achieved?
Well, I think that depends from the president. I think the president has to talk with each other and maybe to resolve all their conflicts. And about the comment you mentioned, I think that there are some good actions that are different from previous governments, especially from the Peña Nieto. The WIF, the financial intelligence. The Financial Intelligence Unit is more active. So there are a lot of investigations. Unfortunately, there are not so much rulings about corruptions, but we have to take keep in mind that this is supposed to be the principal flag of López Obrador administration. I think these actions are not enough for all the promises that President López Obrador did during the campaign. So, of course, there are some action, but I think that as a Mexican citizens, we need to ask for more kind of these prosecutions.
Going back to that point, Peniley, of Lozoya parading happily in fancy places in Mexico City, if Senator Guadiana, the lawyer, the main legal team for the president, formerly headed by Scherer, and Mr. Bartlett of the Federal Electricity Utility are named in the Pandora Papers, my guess is that the president should say, "I need your resignation." I'm not saying that you're guilty. I'm simply saying that you're tainted and you have to wait the investigation, but not in my government. Shouldn't that have been the action to take instead of trying to avoid responsibility, protect them, keep them in place? I mean, a leader has to say, it looks like your names are there. I'm not saying you're guilty. I need your resignation. If all goes well and you're cleared, you're welcome to come back. But this is the action because this is my number one item on the agenda. Why doesn't the president take those symbolic, if you will, but important steps to clean his government?
Well, I think that with these cases, well, and with other corruption cases that we have been seeing in the press regarding Mexican officials, current Mexican officials from the government of López Obrador, is, and this is my perception, my opinion, is that he doesn't want to appear, he doesn't want to give the opposition he's not giving them any possibility to say, oh, they are more of the same, because he has this everyday speech saying they were bad, we are good. So if he acknowledged that maybe inside his administrations it's not that perfect, I feel he feels he will be granting something to the opposition to know, it's more of the same, which a lot of people are thinking already in between his former voters, from people that vote for him in 2018 and now feel disappointed and say, well, these guys are more of the same. And he has a good way to do that, and it is because it's true that we found these current officials, but it's true also that the wrongdoing that we found on them was before they were part of the administrations of López Obrador. So what he's saying is that, oh, this doesn't happen in my administration, so maybe it's kind of comical, because he was, oh, maybe they did that before, but now that they are under my administration, they are clean, which was like, oh, I'm a saint, and once they get put inside my administration, so they are clean. But I think we have to analyze that within the political arena in Mexico right now, and López Obrador trying to tie up his administrations, all his allies, and try to say, if you are with me, no matter what happens, no matter what you do, no matter what you did last summer, you are going to be clean right now for me. But we behind this, and I think it's important to try to give this, behind this appearance of nothing is happening, it is true also that the current tax authorities in Mexico have been collecting way more taxes than the previous administrations. That's true. That's also true. So how is going to be the balance between this necessity of López Obrador of tying up all his allies and not giving the opposition any reason to say they are more of the same, and actually doing things? This is why I said in my first intervention, we have to pay close attention to the money, to how much money they are getting back to the country, further than his speech, because I don't expect any change on that arena, on the speech of López Obrador, because I think he's like really focused on 2024, the next federal elections, and he won't do anything that he thinks it could weaken his party. So I think
it's a dilemma, though, right? Because by not acting quickly and decisively and severing these people from his administration, not to give the opposition any reason to attack him and say that they're corrupt, he's leaving them in place, and that's still giving the opposition the same argument. Look, you're protecting the corrupt individuals. So the president is in a dilemma, and I think taking them out, kicking them out of his administration would probably pay off better, because the administration, the opposition can now say, look, the administration is protecting these corrupt people. So the president I think he's making the wrong choice by keeping them, because the opposition can still have the same argument that the president is protecting these corrupt people, right?
But,
this is a dilemma, in other words.
I want to answer to that, but you have to consider that López Obrador won with 30 million votes.
Yeah.
So for him, it is more important to appear in front of his voters that he sticks to his speech. So if the opposition says that, oh, you are taking these people that are corrupt, he can say they're not corrupt, that hasn't been proved, and this is why I'm keeping them. So I think for his own voters, it's better to do that than to acknowledge that they were more of the same. So I'm not an expert, but I feel that this could be the reason. And also because they are doing some other strategies. I want to mention that 3 weeks ago, the Mexican FinCEN, as Rodrigo called it, the Financial Investigative Unit for the Mexican government, filed a civil lawsuit in Miami to try to recover $250 million from this scheme from the former Mexican Security Secretary, General Garcia Luna, which is now in jail in New York, trying to say, oh, this money came from corrupt businesses in Mexico, I want the money back, which is, it's kind of naive, but it's an action that they took to a civil court in the United States. This is different from what other administrations did. I don't know if they are going to be successful in that. Frankly, I don't think so. They're going to be recovering to $250 million. But, it's important, I think, to read what's happening between these different categories. And as Rodrigo said, the rivalities within the government, and try to focus, I think, not less, but try to focus in López Obrador, looking also at what other people in his administration are doing.
Yeah. Rodrigo, there's an interesting question by one of our guests. She says, shouldn't real estate agencies be compelled to know your customers? Look, when we buy properties, when you buy a house, you go through an enormous number of checks. I bought a property in Texas. You bought a property in Texas. Some of us have gone through the process. They check your bank accounts. They check your sources. They check the origin of the money. They check your background. They check your credit record, and on and on. Why is the real estate agents in the United States? Why are the real estate agents in the United States, or the real estate industry in the United States, so willing to just look the other way and say, well, the money looks clean enough to me. You can have 5 properties or 10 or this land or whatever. What is failing? What can be done in the U.S. itself to aid in closing opportunities for this money to get laundered, cleaned out, and then enter? Because I think all process enters the market that way, right? You have to place the money, and then you have to layer it. With the companies, they use the companies to layer the money, and then you integrate it back into the legal economy. Why doesn't the industry have, and maybe you can speculate for us, why don't they have those checks? We've been through it ourselves. Why don't they do that with anybody that wants to buy property and it's coming, say, from Mexico?
Well, as a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in real estate.
Right.
In real estate issues, but I think that for the things I have seen in the corruption scandals that involve Mexican politicians, most of them buy the real estate using companies. They don't put the name, or maybe they use some relative to buy the company.
That's the second step, which is layering, right? You first place the money, then you layer it, and then you reintegrate it. It's a typical scheme. I think Peniley described it very well, perhaps not using these same words, but it's you place the money, you layer it. That's where you create that company, and then you integrate it back. You cleaned it. That's That's how you launder the money.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that.
So maybe these logs, you need to put all these like logs for saying that in the when you create a company, not when you buy the house. I think that's like one thing that it could come to know where the money to create this company came from. I think that could be like a solution, but I'm not an expert in real estate.
Yeah, well, we've crossed the 1 hour. I think it's been a good conversation. Peniley, you're invited to do it again. I think it's important that we meet again as this progresses. We'll invite you again, and as you follow your investigative journalism, and then hopefully in the future we'll have you in person in Houston to talk to us about your extraordinary work. So I thank everyone for joining us today. I think this is a real test for the López Obrador administration. We'll see if it passes. I mean, as things develop, we'll know the real intentions of the president. And I certainly hope that the president is not so focused on his political party retaining power at the expense of his promises, what he promised to do, which is to fight corruption. I know he's in a dilemma, but I think there are the right choices and there are the wrong choices. And it seems to me that the president is picking the wrong choice. I'd rather cut the heads of the corrupt people before or after and fulfill my promise and get an electoral victory through fulfilling my promises than protecting these people to try to avoid the opportunity for the opposition to recriminate in the future that my administration is not corrupt, when the evidence that's coming out shows that there's plenty of corrupt individuals participating in the administration. So thank you, Peniley, for this. Thank you, Rodrigo. We'll meet again. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.